Howdy, this is Lemmy with RevZilla, here to talk to you today about the best modifications you can make to your sport bike. So if you're watching this video, my guess is that you probably are fairly new to sport bikes, and you might be new to bike modification as well. You know you want to change a few things up on your motorcycle, but you're not entirely certain where your money might be best spent. We're here to help. Now, in order to tell you what's going to be best for your motorcycle, we really need to consider intended usage. Some of you are going to be riding on the street primarily. I imagine that's going to involve most of the people watching this video, but a smaller subset of you are probably going to be interested in taking your bike to the track and exploring the outer limits of what you and your motorcycle can do. So we've actually set this video up with two different sections. We've got a street section up front. You can see we've got our R6 kitted out with some nifty bits here. We're going to blow this thing apart in the other section too and put some track-friendly items on there. Now, as I mentioned, this is an R6. You may have a different motorcycle. Fortunately though, sport bikes are reasonably homogeneous. They're very similar motorcycles. So if you see something cool on our R6, odds are good somebody's making a similar product for your motorcycle. Use our bike finder at RevZilla.com and we'll show you the pieces that fit your motorcycle exactly. I also want to chat for just a moment too about the installation. Some of you guys are probably worried about that. Now, given the wide range of products we have on the bike, our installation is going to vary here, anywhere from 1 to 3 beards on our beard scale of difficulty. But I'm going to try and touch a little bit on installation of each piece to give you a little bit of additional texture to help you figure out whether you're capable of doing this stuff on your own or if you want to enlist the help of a friend or perhaps the local motorcycle shop in the installation. Now we're going to get started in this thing. I'm going to start at the back of the bike. Be sure you subscribe to us so you can check out all of the content we're rolling out here at RevZilla.com, including gear reviews, bike reviews, and parts pieces just like this one. So we kick things off at the rear of the bike with a Yoshimura Fender Eliminator kit. Now, a Fender Eliminator kit is almost de rigueur in the sport bike world these days. Everybody seems to use them, and that's because it really does tighten up the rear end of the motorcycle. If you look at a stock sport bike, there's usually this big, huge thing hanging off the back. It's got a license plate and turn signals spaced way far, apart from each other. It winds up looking like a dirt bike on the back of the bike. A Fender Eliminator kit, as I said, helps tighten things up back here. Now, there's lots of different brands out there. We chose Yoshimura on this bike for a couple different reasons. As I mentioned, this is the street section. We know that we're going to be riding. We need to keep the bike legal. Not every single Fender Eliminator kit has a provision for a license plate light. Yoshimura includes an LED license plate light. Huge selling point for us, keeps the bike legal. One of the other things we really liked about this too is it allows us to retain use of the factory turn signals. There are some Fender Eliminator kits out there that don't make it entirely clear that you need to swap out your turn signals as well. It can really add expense and time onto the job. Now, one thing I do want to mention, we had talked about installation. This was a little bit of a bear on the R6. We took a couple hours to install this thing correctly. If you're thinking about putting a Fender Eliminator kit on your bike, remember, some bikes really do require a few hours in order to do things correctly. Let's move on to the next modification I made here. You actually can't see it right now. It's under the seat, so we're going to pop this pillion seat off here, and I'll show you exactly what it is that I'm talking about, and that's this puppy. This is USB power. I added USB power to our bike, so let's pull this off of here, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what it is. Now, we have a battery under the seat here, standard setup for many sport bikes, and we also have an SAE lead coming off there, which we run back here so we can hook up a battery tender or a float charger to the bike and not have to worry about using tools. Now, most bikes are going to come with an SAE tender lead from your dealer. Just about everything I see coming out of dealers these days has one installed, and that's where you can capitalize and use this battery tender adapter. So this will plug directly into the end of your tender lead, but what this does too is adapts your power down to a USB port there. So it takes your 12-volt power, drops it down to the 5.5 required for most USB connections. This can be really useful for street scenarios. Say you're riding around, stop off for lunch. You can now charge your cell phone very quickly and without grabbing any tools. Makes the bike really friendly to use, again, in those street-type scenarios. Now, some of you may be saying, well, I don't have an SAE tender lead on my bike. In that case, you may want to consider a similar item by Trackside. So first, obviously, there's an SAE tender lead included, which is why I'm recommending this. But there's another group of folks who might want to consider that, and that's people who actually want to use a USB item while they're riding around on the motorcycle. So notice here these mounting wings on here. These are designed to give a little bit more permanent installation. So instead of running something to the back of the bike where it's convenient to get to, but it's out of the way, you may actually want to run power up north, up near your clip-on somewhere, so you can use something USB powered while you're riding. Again, for instance, your GPS perhaps, or maybe your cell phone for GPS. You can use that stuff while you're on the motorcycle. Next modification to get to here, you can see we have a set of LighTech Spools on this bike. Now, if you don't know what a spool is, let me give you a crash course really quickly. In the old days, you would just jack a bike up from the frame underneath the bike. If you take a look under here, though, we have all this delicate plastic and exhaust. None of these are good load-bearing points. If you slide a regular motorcycle jack under here, you're very likely to break some things. Enter the spool. The spool is how we get the back end of the bike up in the air. Most of the manufacturers of sport bikes will include a threaded boss somewhere on the swing arm, and what we can do then is thread in this little guy, the spool. And what the spool does is actually accept the paddock stand. You'll notice we actually have this bike off of the lift by just a little bit. You can see this rear wheel is spinning free here. Now, spools are awesome because they are low cost. They're also a really easy installation. You're looking at probably 5 minutes on here, and they're a huge labor saver. As I mentioned, it's really easy to lubricate your chain or perhaps pop your tires off, so you can either do tire work or bring them down to your motorcycle shop and have tires mounted up and balanced. Regardless of whether it's you working on your bike or the shop, these are going to save somebody an awful lot of labor. Quick pro tip here. The reason I like the LighTech is these come in a natural finish, you can see here. Some of the anodized aluminum ones look really cool, but as you use these, the lips of the paddock stand actually tend to kind of pull the anodizing off there. They can look scarred up and look a little ugly. If you have a natural finish, it really minimizes and hides that damage. It just occurs from the spools actually being used. So while we're down here, let's go to our next modification. This is our big splurge item here, a Yoshimura TRC exhaust. So I say this is a splurge item. It's the most expensive item we put on here, and it's probably the least functional. But man, these things sound awesome and they look great. And that's the reason they're so popular with sport bike riders. For those of you who are looking for some justification, know that you will drop a little bit of weight in most cases with a slip-on exhaust. So moving on to our next modification, slide up here to the tank. You're probably gonna have some trouble seeing this. We have a TechSpec snakeskin tank pad on there. I have one here that actually has not been installed, so you can see exactly what it is we're working with. So again, this is the street section. We know that everybody's gonna be riding their bike, and not everybody's gonna be in full leathers all the time. You may jump on your bike wearing different clothes. You may have zippers, buttons, your belt buckle perhaps. You can really tear up the paint on this very vulnerable area of the tank. Enter the tank pad. Now there's lots and lots of tank pads out there and available. All of them work pretty well. The reason we actually chose the TechSpec was because this material is fairly heavy. It's very rubbery. Not only does it shield against abrasion in that delicate paint area, but this is also a very thick rubbery material. So it also has some limited impact protection as well. Think about all those times you've grabbed a big handful of front brake and slid forward onto the bike. Well, the tank winds up absorbing that impact, and something like this tank pad helps spread out the impact load a little bit. I've actually seen people impact the tank hard enough to dent it, so this may actually end up saving you some body work. Really easy installation, super inexpensive item. I see these on a lot of motorcycles, and it makes sense. They just work. Now, sticking with that bike protection theme, you can see up here I've got a set of Shogun frame sliders on here as well. Now, frame sliders can protect against a number of different things. They might save your bike crashing down the track at 100 miles an hour sliding along, or more realistically for us, it may save your plastics or perhaps some other things from getting dinged up in just like a parking lot tip over, or maybe just dumping the bike in your driveway at low speeds. Shoguns are perfect for that. Let me show you why. So okay, these are cylindrical, they're black, they're unobtrusive, that much is great, but these are also designed well for somebody who is going to use their bike primarily on the street. Notice the length of these sliders. While this might not make them the optimal choice for track use, what this does do is provide the best chance at protecting expensive pieces if you do suffer, again, one of those parking lot tip overs. Because they stick out from the bike fairly far, there's a good chance these will save some more expensive pieces. The other thing I really dig about these too is the ease of installation. Note this bracket on here. This bracket is because these are no-cut sliders. That means you don't have to hack up your factory fairings in order to install them. On some racier items, what you'll discover is these things have to be mounted after a hole is put into your fairings. There's only two problems with that. First, the installation is kind of a pain, and secondly, you just had to cut a big fat hole in your factory fairings. Not everybody wants to do that. Instead, with a set of Shogun no-cuts, what you can do is pop them onto your bike, usually very quickly, and not have to worry about marring up your pretty factory paint. So let's talk about our final modification too, and that's going to be up front here. We've got a Puig windscreen mounted. So this thing looks a little different than our factory screen. Fairly obviously, there is a tint to this. So yes, it does look cool, but one of the other things you may notice visually that's a bit different are these hips you can see located in the windscreen. These are really helpful for wind management. Now remember, this is a race replica bike. These things are designed to manage wind at super high speeds. But again, being that we're zipping around on the street, we might not be hitting those speeds. I know several of you have probably been on your bike on the highway, droning along, and you're feeling the wind buffeting your head. You're just getting kicked around there. Well, these hips that Puig integrates into their screen helps kind of move the air just a little bit differently. It's going to move some of the air onto your chest and your shoulders, spreading it across you, but then it's going to give you a nice pocket of clean air around your helmet so you don't suffer that buffeting, that bobbling that can just be so hard in your neck muscles and really tire you out. So if you want to spend a little bit longer on your motorcycle and still be comfortable, something like a Puig windscreen is an easy installation, but it also just yields great benefits. Now, all told, the parts we put on here are under 800 bucks, which I think is very reasonable for a fairly late model sport bike like this one. However, I recognize some of you guys are probably going to be willing to throw a little bit more into your bike, so we're going to blow some of this stuff apart, and I'm going to set this thing up with some more track-friendly items. Let's get the wrenches out. Now, I've got our bike geared up for track work. Before some of you dedicated track rats jump in here and say, that bike's not prepped for the track, let me just come right out and say that we're not talking about how to get to the track right now. We're talking about some products that might be a good bang for the buck. So we're not going to discuss taping up your headlights, removing your mirror, safety wiring things. Instead, we're trying to highlight things that'll make your track experience a lot better without dropping a ton of coin all at one shot. So in the old days, it was all about making your bike faster. But with the current state of race reps, these bikes are already pretty fast. You're probably better off trying to get that power to the ground. So that's why we installed our first item you can see here. We have a set of Pirelli Diablo Rosso 3 tires on this bike. Now, these aren't an inexpensive tire, but I still think of these as the working man's tire. And the reason I say that is that these tires are equally at home on the street as they are on the track. A tire that's geared a little bit more for track work has some very distinct advantages. First, they have a little different profile. It's a little bit more aggressive, so throwing the bike into a turn is significantly easier than it is with a tire that's more focused on street. The other thing that's cool about a track day tire, this one in particular, is that this is a dual compound tire. And what that means is the shoulders have strips of different compound rubber. It's a little bit softer, so you're going to get maximum grip when you're at your greatest lean angle. That's the sort of thing you need to build confidence and ability and really, improve your riding at the track. Now, the next modification we made, you actually can't see. It's under the seat here. We installed an Antigravity lithium battery. The reason we did that was to kind of help shed some weight. So as I mentioned earlier, you're not really trying to make your bike go faster. That's not the goal. But beating weight off the bike can lead to a little bit faster motorcycle. But the other reason we love weight loss here at RevZilla is because it also improves your braking and your handling. You're improving all three things at once with a minimum of cost. Now, it can be really difficult to beat weight off a bike, especially with a modern day race replica, but the battery on most bikes is still a good place to save a little bit of weight. I've actually got a pair of these batteries here. You might be able to see as I'm using these things the difference just in handling because of the large weight difference between them. So here's the factory unit, ringing in at 7.5 pounds. It's a pretty significant item. This anti-gravity though, 2.5. It's a pretty significant weight reduction for not too much money. Let's move on to the next modification we made. This one actually, replaces one of the street items we had used. You may remember from the street section, we installed a TechSpec snakeskin tank pad up top to protect the paint. We've switched this out for TechSpec's C3 tank package. Now, this is obviously more tank pads. There's 5 on here. There's the one up top still, but we also have these ones on the side. These are made of a little different material. Rather than being that heavy, thick rubber designed to cushion and absorb impact, these are different because they're kind of foamier and they're much tackier. The idea here is to grab your leather so you can control the bike easily. If you've never ridden a sport bike that has something like this installed on it, it makes it really easy to grab the tank with your knees. You really need to control the bike with your lower body in order to keep your upper body free to give steering and throttle and braking inputs. Something like this is a really easy installation, and they're also inexpensive. The amount of confidence you'll gain by controlling the bike with your lower body really is kind of incredible, especially considering the small time and price investment you have on them. Rounding things out, we installed a set of GB Racing engine covers. This is a full set. Now, you can buy these a la carte, or you can also buy them as a set. We elected to throw the set on our bike. Now, GB Racing covers are going to serve as an ancillary piece of protection for the sliders we threw on in our street section. What these are going to do is actually help other riders as well as helping you. It's going to keep the fluids in your bike from hitting the track should you go down, keeping other riders riding around the track. But one of the other things it's going to do too is keep any of the track pieces from winding up inside your motor. Having something like a GB Racing cover might be the difference between you going down, scraping up your covers, maybe bashing up your plastics, you have to throw a lever and a pedal on there, and you're back out on the track for the next session, or taking your blown, roached motor and wheeling this thing up on the trailer, heading home, wondering exactly what it is that you have to fix to get your bike back on the road. It's cheap insurance, and as I had mentioned, with a set of frame sliders, it really is a great foundation for good protection of your motorcycle. You should also be aware too, you're going to be spending a fair amount of money on protection for yourself. You need to work gear into your equation as well. Between leathers and a good helmet and some boots, you're going to be spending a couple bucks to get out there, so we didn't want to make the bike preparation too crazy. Now, if you want any information on any of these products you saw, click that info button on your desktop or your mobile device and get familiar with these products a little bit more in depth. If you want some personalized attention too, we've got plenty of people here at RevZilla who ride both street and track and are more than willing to help you out. You can get a hold of us, cs@revzilla.com if you want to send us an email, or give us a ring on the telling bone, 877-792-9455. I'm Lemmy, I'm out of here.